Join me on my travels as I explore extraordinary places and reveal bizarre tales and characters from our capital's rich history. In this programme, the birth of a great British status symbol, Dagenham's real ghost, and the historic discovery in the box in the basement. Once, it was a sign of your status in life. It said that you belonged to a particular tribe. It announced to the world that you were on a certain rung in society's ladder, and that you were British. You wore it on your head. For the first half of the 20th century, the bowler hat was as British a symbol as fish and chips, Rolls-Royce, or a rolled umbrella. It was the uniform headwear for the middle class, for the bank manager, for the civil servant who had a position for life with a pension. The working man wore a flat cap, the top hat. But it was designed for a very different purpose, and it all started here at James Lock & Co. in St James's. Founded in 1676, James Lock had already been making hats for the well-to-do for about 200 years, when William Coke, later the Earl of Leicester, asked them to design a hard hat for his gamekeepers to protect their heads from low-hanging branches when out riding. The story of the first bowler hat is part of the tradition of the company, and John Stevenson is a direct descendant of James Lock's original business partner. So what exactly was William Coke looking for when he asked for this new design of hat?
Well, William Coke was a Norfolk landowner who lived at Hokham Hall, and as it still is today, it was a major sporting estate. And he was very conscious of the fact that his beaters, who seem strange today, actually wore a hat similar to this, were having it knocked off by bushes, branches, etc.
Now one thinks of that as a sort of a toffs aristocratic's hat, but actually the beaters and the
beaters actually wore a hat of that type, yes.
What was wrong with it then?
That it was simply too high, and it would catch in any obstruction when they were beating pheasants through the woods. So he came to Locks and asked Locks if they could design him a lower crowned hat that would stand up to harsh treatment by his beaters. So Locks took this on board, and this, in fact, is the hat they made in 1850 for William Coke.
So this particular hat is the very first bowler hat?
It's either the first one or one of the very first. It's actually dated 1850 inside,
oh, it is, yes,
when our records show that the first hat was made.
How extraordinary.
So Locks had this hat made by a firm called Bowler. Hence, this is where the name bowler came from. And William Coke came into the shop, apparently, put it on the floor, jumped on it. It stood up to that, so he reckoned it would stand up to any harsh treatment his beaters could give it.
How on earth did it become fashionable in the city?
Presumably, Locks put this out as one of their lines in the 1850s, and from then on it became fashionable.
Who wears bowler hats these days?
We still sell fairly substantial numbers of bowler hats to a very wide range of clientele, but nothing like the numbers that we sold 50 to 100 years ago.
Do you wear one yourself, John?
I do wear one occasionally, unfortunately mostly for funerals, but I do have one, yes.
In the back of the shop lurks the strange device that's used to fit a bowler and other headwear. Patrick Lamb is the company's senior salesman and uses it on all his customers. So Patrick, how do you design me the perfect bowler hat?
With this conformature, what happens is I will take your head shape to make sure that the hat will fit the contours of your head perfectly. This particular model dates from the 1870s, and it's had the high and the mighty under it, the great and the good, from Her Majesty the Queen down to Charlie Chaplin.
This has actually been on the Queen, this very machine?
The actual machine, yes, it has. And the Queen was crowned Queen in 1953. You wouldn't expect her to trot around to Locks. So we went over to the palace with our conformator in the carrier bag, and she was very gracious. And
has she got a normal sized head?
A normal size, very petite head, about 6 5/8, which is rather a small size, but it's in perfect unison with her physique, so it is a good shape.
Well, I'd better have a go now. Bung it on then. So it kind of expands, does it, as it goes on?
It expands all round. It's like canonization. You just press it down like that. This isn't, and it's 1/7 the actual size of your head. Press this down, and now I've got an actual template of your head. But to make sure it's a perfect template, I press it down like that. With the other tools of the trade, this is increased to the full shape of your head. And it takes about 5 minutes to get the whole process complete.
Have I got a normal shaped head?
You have a very artistic head.
Ah. A paper template is pricked by the device, giving an accurate 1/7 scale outline of the head. After the initial fitting, customers always sign their templates.
The next thing we do is we lay him gently on this stand here. That's why you've got these holes. That keeps your head in place. Then we get this is called a brow, and these pegs are flexible. They go in and out like that. So we put that. That's got two little holes there, which fixes onto the actual base, and we very carefully put all these pegs to meet your head very gently on the edges, and the outer circumference of the brow is the actual head shape.
So this returns it from 1/7
to one full size.
An exact template.
Exact template, and as you can see, you're far more smoothly finished when you're 7 sizes larger than you were. And that's the actual head. Actually, it's a very good shape. The thing now is to get the hat he wants and put this in it to make sure it's compatible with his actual head shape.
So that actually finishes the process.
That actually finishes the process.
It's quite a complicated thing, this. Does it ever go wrong?
Sometimes you're caught unawares because you don't realise that your potential customer is wearing a toupee.
Has that happened to you?
It happened to me once. I was very diligently putting the conformator on the customer's head. I got a very good fit, and he was quite happy, but unfortunately his hair came off with the conformator, and he wasn't best pleased to have his pate exposed through the shop because the shop was full at the time.
Was this a well-known person?
I think he was well known, yes.
You're not going to tell me who he is.
I couldn't tell you who he was. He wouldn't be best pleased either.
And how much would the perfect bowler hat cost me?
£205. That includes complete service, after-sales service, everything.
Of course, it's not only the Queen who's put on the conformature. The fitting templates of the famous are preserved here forever. Princess Diana, Laurence Olivier, General de Gaulle, Charlie Chaplin, Lord Lucan, Bob Hope, Larry Hagman, and more recently Michael Palin. The list is almost endless. Some bowlers have achieved great fame through the head on which they sat. In 1998, Christie's sold a lock bowler for £62,000. It had a rather unusual heritage. The bowler was the one worn by Oddjob in the James Bond film Goldfinger. It was bought anonymously. And that sum was more than twice the amount reached in the same auction by the Lotus car that went underwater in The Spy Who Loved Me. Ah, the power of the bowler. This is Valance House, one of 5 mansion houses that used to grace the borough of Dagenham. There have been ghostly goings-on here for many years, including one in the 1960s, which even the experts agree is definitely true. A house has stood here in these grounds since the 1300s. This present one was built in the 1500s and has been altered and extended many times. It used to be surrounded by a moat, now the haunt of fishermen, and it's now surrounded by one of the largest council estates in Europe. The house was owned for hundreds of years by the Fanshaws, but now all that remains of them are their portraits. This model shows the house and its estate as it used to be at the turn of the 20th century. You can see the moat and an orchard, which has an important part to play in our story. This is all that's left of the orchard now. It's rather beautiful, isn't it? And it was here that the ghost story I mentioned earlier actually started. Back in the 1890s, the May family now owned the property, and their gardener was in the garden one night checking the trees when suddenly he spotted a lady dressed in white wandering round and round this cherry tree. He wasn't quite sure what to make of it and headed back to the house. The May family had 3 young daughters, and the gardener accused them of playing a joke on him, running around the garden in their night clothes to look like a ghost.
But they hadn't left the house. Besides which, they were Victorian young ladies, after all, who would never ever dream of running around outside dressed only in their night clothes.
A search of the grounds was immediately instigated. Whoever it was couldn't get far as they had that moat to cross, but no woman in white was ever found. The family came to believe it was the ghost of Agnes de Valance, who'd lived in the house hundreds of years ago and was murdered by her brother for her inheritance. A dagger had been found in the moat, and locals thought it was the one used to kill Agnes, and that she haunted the lawns where she was killed. Over time, people reported seeing apparitions here.
Maybe you don't believe in ghosts, but the next part of this extraordinary story is absolutely true, without a doubt.
Valance House in Dagenham is home to the ghost of the woman in white. But, as I found, this is no ordinary ghost story. It's a real ghost story. Local photographer Egbert Smart had taken thousands of photographs in the Dagenham area in his role as an official council photographer.
Then, one day in 1966, he captured this stunning image.
It was published in this local journal and in local papers. An article described the story of the gardener and the lady in white, and how the ghost had been photographed pointing to the spot in the lake where the dagger used to murder Agnes was found.
The photo was printed in various ghost hunting publications of the day, and suddenly local people started reporting having seen exactly the same ghosts from the photo.
They believed that Egbert Smart had captured on film the image of the ghost they'd heard stories of when they were children.
It was about here that the photograph was taken from, and the ghost was over there. In fact, she still is. That's because, of course, there never was any ghost. The photographer had faked the picture using his own daughter Susan, and that's her 40 years on. So this is you in the photo?
Yeah, that's me here as a ghost.
What do you think, looking at it now?
Well, it seems incredible that it's so long ago, of course, and astonishing that people are still talking about it.
He didn't set out deliberately to deceive as such.
Oh, I don't think so, no. I think he wanted to see if he could take the photograph. In theory, you could do it, and he wanted to practice to see if he could. And then when it worked, it was a little more successful than he'd thought. And then other people decided that it was a good photo.
So it was published in this magazine, and of
Yeah.
course it's not clear that it's a fake bear, is it?
No.
What was the reaction of people?
Well, people, as soon as it was published, people started to come deliberately to see the ghost. The fishermen that were here all the time, some would say that they'd already seen the ghost, and it was, it happens every time they came fishing that the ghost would be here, so they were familiar with her.
So these are people stepping forward and saying, yes, I've seen the ghost,
Yes,
I've seen
that's
that
right.
girl.
Confirming that it was the right photo, yeah.
It's extraordinary. What did you
Yeah.
think about that?
Well, I knew otherwise, but other people would come along. They hadn't been here before, but they'd come to see the ghost. And crowds of people apparently were turning up, and it all got a little too much. The fishermen couldn't fish quietly, and I think the authorities here were a bit concerned that so many people were turning up. So they tried to put a stop to it.
How did they do that?
They published the photo again, explaining how it was taken.
And what was the reaction to that?
Everybody read it, I presume, took it in, and then didn't believe it. They believed in the ghost.
So even when people were told it was a fake, they didn't believe it, or they didn't want to believe it?
No, they didn't believe in the explanation. No.
Why was that? Do you know?
Perhaps it's a better story. Don't know.
It's an extraordinary tale, isn't it?
And that is exactly how the story stands today. People know the photograph is of Susan, not a ghost. But that doesn't stop people coming to Valance House to see the ghost. They still want to believe.
But they're all identifying the girl in the photo.
They're all identifying as the woman in the photograph, as the ghost, even though she was actually just a fake photograph.
What do you make of that? I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's possibly a very good example of the force of suggestion.
And even ghost hunters are interested, they're fascinated.
We have no end of people who want to come and stay in Valance House. They want to stay on October the 31st, do a sponsored ghost run or something like that. We've even had mediums in here who sort of come into this room, which is the haunted room, and said it feels cold, even though it's really because we don't have any heating in the room. But quite a lot of people feel there's a presence. A lot of children get scared and don't want to come up the staircase.
But the ghost hunters are interested in this particular photo, aren't they?
They're interested in the photo, yes. A lot of them are a little bit disappointed to find out that it's a faked photograph, although they still go on looking for the real ghost. Because, of course, it is a real ghost story from 100 years ago. It's just the photograph that's faked.
Is one of the reasons people are so interested is because actually we all deep down want to believe in ghosts?
Yes, they do, otherwise the ghost stories wouldn't be so popular and people wouldn't want to come here and be a medium and contact the dead. It's something I think people do want to believe in, life after death.
And what's your take on this?
A ghost is good for business and I don't like to say anything against it.
So, there you have it. Even if you invent a ghost and then own up to it, people still claim to see it. There really is nothing like a cracking good ghost story.
I'm in the world of eyeballs. Well, of sight, really. I'm at the College of Optometrists near the Strand in central London. I've come to find their rarest discovery, but more of that a bit later. Diagnosing sight problems and correcting eyesight you'd think has come a long way, but have a look at this. The Victorians invented a machine, this one was made in 1889, where you made your own diagnosis for what specs you needed. It's a bit like trying on those cheap reading glasses in the chemist's.
You look through these eye holes and rotate through a selection of different lenses, and when eventually you find a pair that suits your own eyes, you simply take them, as it were, ready-made off the shelf. No sense of fashion in terms of the frames in those days, of course. You basically got what you were given.
But this wasn't the last word in ocular innovation to be found in the college's museum. As the First World War raged across Europe, British soldiers were receiving eye injuries in battle. But the Army's spectacle depot in London provided at least a temporary solution, and their work is now one of the most striking exhibits here.
The idea is that this set would have all the shapes, sizes and colours that would be required for at least a temporary solution. If you imagine the large number of cases that were coming back from the front, there was clearly a need to supply them with a prosthetic eye quickly and efficiently. And the idea is that this set has most of what could be required.
How did they actually decide which was right for you?
Well, it was a case of trial and error.
That you'd actually kind of try it on? I mean, obviously one wouldn't normally do this, but that feels about the right sort of fit. Does it? Is the colour match right?
It's a relatively good colour match.
Feels very strange. It's an odd subject, this, isn't it? I feel a bit sort of queasy looking at all these full size.
It's one of our most popular exhibits.
Is it? You obviously don't feel queasy looking at them.
I have no problem with it at all.
Among the college's other treasures are rare prints of spectacle wearers through the ages. The various mechanisms through which our ability to see have been measured, and of course some historic specs.
There are spectacles here from many weird and wonderful characters from history. These are the sides of the spectacles owned by the legendary Dr. Crippen. And these very unusually designed spectacles were owned by Dr. Samuel Johnson. They're over 200 years old. They're actually too small to fit on my face. They wouldn't have gone over his ears. These bits would have held the glasses in place on his cheeks. It's an extraordinary thought to think that he could well have used these to write his famous dictionary.
But what I've actually come here for is an extraordinary story which begins with a clue in one of the college's old prints.
If I keep my head very still and don't twitch my nose too much, I can perch this 300-year-old pair of spectacles on the end of my nose. It's not very easy and it's not very comfortable. Yet, since their invention in the 13th century and for the following 500 years, this balancing act was the way the world wore its specs. Then, in the 1700s, this advert appeared.
It seems to show a new design, until then apparently unseen by the world. Glasses with sides.
They were invented by a London optician, Edward Scarlett, at his shop in Soho. They were the very first glasses as we know them, but it had always been believed that no examples of this milestone in the history of sight correction still existed.
But one day, about 10 years ago, an historian at the College of Optometrists was rummaging about in the institution's basement. He found a box of rubbish and was about to throw it out. He was about to make that rarest of discoveries that I mentioned earlier. Rummaging around in the box, he found these, the only pair of Edward Scarlett spectacles still in existence. And these are they. Probably the oldest spectacles, as we know them, in the world.
One wonders why nobody had ever thought of putting sides on it before.
It was because spectacles before that were considered as something for temporary use. You read a page of a book with them and then you took them off again. You didn't wear them in continuous use.
So we now have the first spectacles with sides. Did the idea catch on?
Well, absolutely. The spectacles with sides became the normal type, and all sorts of different designs of side were invented, most of which had to fit into the folds of a wig, and therefore the spectacles are commonly known as wig spectacles.
Fundamentally, the design hasn't changed at all, has it?
Well, the simple design of two lenses held together by a bridge with hinges and sides is, in essence, what a pair of spectacles is still today.
And for that, we have Mr. Edward Scarlett of the old spectacle shop in Soho to thank.